On RNZ National, I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei, a school bus is left dangling precariously over an Auckland motorway bridge after crashing through a barrier. Auckland mayoral candidate Viv Beck pulls the pin, but she could still win. We'll explain how. We'll go live to London for the latest on plans for the Queen's funeral. A young man born in Christchurch is shot dead by US police. His father says it's murder. The real estate developers offering to pay your mortgage for a year. Yep, there is a catch. And the Aussie scientists land a big fish in the fossil world. It is a mere 380 million years old. Catch us live on Sky Channel 83 or Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon. Ngā mihi o te ahi, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The mother of a Christchurch-born young man killed by police in the United States says police need to know they'll be punished if they act criminally. 22-year-old Christian Glass was shot 5 times after calling police for help when his car got stuck near Denver, Colorado in June. Christian's parents have now made an emotional plea for the officers involved to be charged and vow to pursue justice for their son. His mother Sally says there's a systemic problem with policing in the United States.
And what keeps me upright and what keeps me putting one foot in front of the other is to seek justice and really to get that behind bars.
Sally Glass says the police officer who killed her son was back at work within days of the shooting. The mother of a St Mary's college student says it'll be a while before her daughters take the bus again. Around 24 students from St Mary's were on a school bus that ended up partly dangling off a motorway overbridge in Auckland this morning. One mother says she was worried for her children.
It was a bit scary because my girls catch the bus, and as soon as I saw the article on social media, the bus looked really familiar. So I thought, oh no, that must be one of my, but lucky enough it wasn't.
One person was taken to hospital with minor injuries. There were tense scenes in the High Court at Whanganui today as a Hells Angels gang prospect was sentenced for the murder of his partner. Open Justice reports that Zane Paulder Wallace was jailed for life with a minimum term of 15 and a half years for killing Jasmine Wilson. Jimmy Ellingham reports.
Wallace had beaten the 30-year-old for months before she was dumped, unconscious and badly injured, at Whanganui Hospital's emergency department in 2019. In court, a brawl almost erupted between the families of Ms Wilson and Wallace, who were separated in the public gallery but yelled abuse and threats at each other. One of Ms Wilson's sisters told the court she feels sick thinking of the pain and suffering she went through, while her mother says her anger over what's happened is almost unhinged.
Ukrainian authorities have found a mass grave containing 440 bodies in the northeastern town of Izium. Thousands of Russian troops fled Izium last weekend after occupying the city. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is leaving death behind it everywhere and must be held responsible. Russia has denied targeting civilians or committing war crimes. A Dunedin councillor who took the council to the Supreme Court over a $12 parking ticket has had his application to appeal dismissed. Lee Vandervis explained to the council's customer service after he was given the ticket in complained to the council's customer service after he was given the ticket in 2019. An investigation found he breached the council's code of conduct while making his complaint. The Supreme Court said today there was no miscarriage of justice during the decision to censure him. Mr Vandervis has to pay $2,500 in costs. And a Whanganui moggy has used up one of its 9 lives, but is none the worse for wear after being stuck in a phoenix palm for more than 2 weeks. The microchipped cat, identified as Rio, was plucked from the tree this morning and reunited with its owners. Jodie Hawuda of Animal Rescue New Zealand says the elusive feline is in good nick.
It's only a kitten. It's very healthy, especially for being up in the tree for 2 and a bit weeks. But yes, in good health, absolutely wants cuddles.
Rio's owner, Brad Larson, says his family's overjoyed to have her home. He believes Rio took off about 3 weeks ago after he brought home a new puppy. In sport, All Blacks coach Ian Foster says he has sympathy for the Wallabies after their controversial Bledisloe Cup loss in Melbourne last night, but is adamant the referee made the right call over time wasting. Up by 18 points midway through the second half, the All Blacks leaked 3 tries as the Wallabies roared back to lead 37-34 with just minutes remaining. But when Wallabies' first 5, Bernard Foley, was called for time wasting by the ref and forced to hand the ball back to the All Blacks, the visitors scored right on full time to snatch victory 39-37.
Overall in the match, I still feel it was a game that we deserved to come out on the right side. We just did it the hard way. But you've got to feel for the Wallabies. I guess it's the first time it's happened in some ways, but let's not treat that as a reason to get upset with the referee. He was very clear in his communication, and I'd be disappointed if he get villainised for that.
The Silver Ferns' 2 tests against Jamaica and Hamilton have been cancelled after Jamaican netball officials failed to get visas for the team in time. The 2 tests were due to be played on Saturday and Sunday, with a third in Auckland on Wednesday. All 3 tests will now be played in Auckland next week, but the schedule is yet to be confirmed, as Netball New Zealand is still unsure when the Jamaicans will arrive. And basketball legend Michael Jordan's jersey from the opening game of the 1998 NBA Finals has sold for almost $17 million in an auction, making it the most expensive piece of game-worn sports memorabilia in history. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, the man on stage with Salman Rushdie when he was attacked. City of Asylum founder Henry Rees. How an indigenous Brazilian tribe is defending its land. And Zenith Virago is a death walker who wants us to rethink the way we deal with the end of our own and others' lives. Ko Kim Hillaho. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National. We're on radio, rnz.co.nz, and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. For Northland and Auckland, partly cloudy with showers, mainly in the west, clearing tomorrow morning. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the central high country, cloudy periods and isolated showers from this evening. Waikato to Kapiti, fine today, frost or fog tomorrow morning, then cloudy periods from tomorrow afternoon. From Gisborne to Waididapa, cloud and a few showers spreading north, then becoming fine tomorrow morning, early for Waididapa. Wellington, Marlborough and Nelson, cloudy periods, isolated showers clearing Wellington and elsewhere tomorrow morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, partly cloudy with a few showers, but fine in Westland and the north of Fiordland today. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, isolated showers clearing and becoming mainly fine, frosty tomorrow morning. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, showers today. The time is 7 minutes past 5. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:20.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. More than 20 schoolgirls have had a lucky escape after their journey to school this morning took a terrifying twist. The St Mary's College students were just kilometres from school when their Coachways bus crashed on a motorway overbridge through a railing, leaving the front part of the bus teetering over the bridge. One person was taken to hospital and the students were checked over by St John ambulance staff as the inner city was brought to a standstill. Haisa Almeida has more.
24 students were on their way to St Mary's College in Ponsonby this morning when their school bus careered into a motorway overpass on Newton Road in peak traffic just after 8 a.m. One person was taken to hospital with minor injuries and 24 schoolgirls were offloaded to safety as the bus was left teetering over the barrier in mid-air. The student's distraught mother rushed to be with her daughter after learning of the crash.
I was so shocked actually when she told me that what happened, because I can't lose one of my family members anymore. I just lost 2 this last month. No, I can't.
A man who saw the bus crashing says he's never seen anything like it before.
I just saw the bus go over. I didn't see how it happened or nothing. I've seen buses go up walls and stuff when I was with NZ Bus.
Outside St Mary's College this afternoon, some parents chose to pick their children up rather than having them take a return journey. This mother says it will take a while for some students to feel comfortable catching a bus again.
was a bit scary because my girls catch the bus, and as soon as I saw the article on social media, the bus looked really familiar. So I thought, oh no, that must be one of my, but lucky enough it wasn't.
St Mary's principal Sarah Dwan declined to be interviewed, but in a statement says support is being provided for the children and their families.
All our students are safe and well, and we are incredibly proud of how they have reacted and responded. We are also grateful for the response of the emergency services and bus company.
The school bus is operated by Coachways. Director David Marsden declined to comment on the accident. The police say everyone was taken from the bus safely and the cause of the crash is under investigation.
And if you were listening to that on radio, the video version of that story will be online. Some pretty incredible pictures of that bus over the barrier there. And St Mary's College principal Sarah Dwan has told parents in the weekly newsletter this afternoon that while she visited the scene of the accident this morning, it wasn't until she watched footage of the crash on social media that she realised the severity of the situation. She says it is fortunate that no students were injured. Viv Beck has announced her withdrawal from Auckland's mayoral race, though she can still technically win the city's top job. She is the second high-profile candidate to pull out in the last few weeks after Leo Molloy announced his withdrawal in August. Many believe it is now down to a two-horse race between Efessel Collins and Wayne Brown. Jonty Dine reports.
Ms Beck's announcement comes on the day voting in Tamaki Makaurau opens. Therefore, her name will still appear on the ballot. Auckland Electoral Officer Dale Ofsowski has confirmed it is too late to officially pull out, and should she win, she would then have the option to resign.
She's still a candidate, even though she has withdrawn, in inverted commas. She can't legally do so, so her name still appears, and yes, she could still be elected mayor if she gets sufficient votes.
Mr Ofsowski says votes for Ms Beck are not invalid.
Well, she can't actually withdraw. Once nominations close, a candidate is unable to withdraw by legislation, but she can simply cease to campaign. But her name will still be appearing on all the voting documents, and her votes will still be counted and released.
However, he says people should be careful not to waste their vote.
Yes, the candidate has announced that she doesn't want to carry on or continue campaigning, then voters should simply not vote for her. That's a simple message.
An August poll by the Auckland Ratepayers Alliance placed Beck in fifth spot on 13%, behind Efessel Collins, Leo Molloy, Wayne Brown and other. The Heart of the City Chief Executive's campaign took a recent hit following news of an unpaid $350,000 bill to an advertising company. Candidate Wayne Brown says with both Beck and Leo Molloy out, it leaves a two-horse race for the mayoralty between himself and Efessel Collins.
So it's basically now that you've got a choice between a person who wants to be careful with a spend and someone wants to spend a lot.
Mr Brown acknowledged the friendly and constructive way Beck had conducted her campaign, though the revelations of her debt was not a good look. Efessel Collins also says Beck was a worthy opponent. Democracy Services Manager Rose Leonard says voter apathy is a real issue in local body elections.
Around New Zealand, the average council is around about 40%, but actually in Auckland it was lower than that. Last time we had 35%, and that was down from 38% the election before. So we're really looking for a big lift this year and are doing everything we can to sort of address the things that we know really kind of hinder people from voting.
She says compared with the general election, voter turnout is about half of what central government returns.
Anywhere, that you're voting for your council, they just don't understand why, like what's the importance of their vote. And it's because they don't understand or know what council does. And that's kind of sad for us because what we know is that council has sort of an impact on our daily lives, literally from the moment we get up.
Ms Leonard says Aucklanders should not underestimate the influence of local council.
Also things like, regional and local parks, our libraries, things that Aucklanders really love are all governed by the people who are going to be elected. So it's really, really important that you vote and get the people who are going to make great decisions, not just for now, but actually great investment decisions for the future, because we've got lots of investment to catch up on.
Vote boxes will be available in Auckland up until midday, Saturday, October the 8th.
And that report was from Jonty Dine. So Viv Beck officially has withdrawn from the Auckland mayoral race, but legally she can't withdraw. So if any votes are cast for her in the ballot, they still count because she's left it too late. Let us know what you think about that. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has arrived in London ahead of Queen Elizabeth's funeral on Monday. Over the weekend, she will meet King Charles III and Prince William, along with the UK's new Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
I've only been here a few hours, but I can already see what you've been observing for many days, that this is a nation in mourning. And of course, we observe that from New Zealand, but being here and seeing it in person, you can just see the sheer scale of this period for the United Kingdom. And that first opportunity to see the King face to face, I'll simply share the sorrow that New Zealand has and pass on our deepest condolences. At the end of the day, although this is a period of transition for him, he has also lost his beloved mother.
Te Piramia Jacinda Ardern there. Meanwhile, as mourners queue for potentially the longest wait of their lives to see Queen Elizabeth II lying in state, the blackouts are back in England as shop windows are decorated to commemorate her life. The day of the Queen's state funeral has been declared a bank holiday, and there'll be no fries with that across the UK, as even McDonald's will be closed so staff are able to pay their respects. Katie Todd and Nick Munro are in London.
Oxford Street, central London, Thursday afternoon. Things are looking a little different. Among the familiar black cabs and red buses and thousands of people, this visitor has spotted a small change in the storefronts.
You can see it in the stores. They've blackened out the windows. Even the fashion that's in the windows is black.
Nods to Queen Elizabeth feature in the form of printed messages, photo displays and in a few cases entirely blacked out windows. Department store Fortnum & Mason has opted for the latter. The store was the grocer to the Queen and she officially opened its tea salon in 2012. Now Fortnum & Mason declined to be interviewed, but in a statement said they were deeply saddened by the passing of the Queen. They described her as having always been gracious on her visits to the store and said they were proud to have served her well. London's oldest bookstore, Hatchard's, has opted for flowers and a photo of the late monarch. The shop has supplied literature to Buckingham Palace for over 200 years, and its manager Francis Cleverden says staff wanted to create a simple and dignified tribute.
A gesture of what's happened and a gesture to a great extent of how much we admired her and how much she was very good to us.
Inside, books about the royal family feature prominently on a table near the front of the store. They're proving particularly popular at the moment.
Our royal books always split into the ones which are pictures and the ones which are text. And both of those are going completely wild at the moment, as you can imagine.
And right this moment, authors are writing more books to celebrate the late Queen's life. Canadian John Fraser is one of those authors.
And it's a bit daunting to think you've got anything to add to it, but I have my own take on it, and so I'm trying to go around London this week talking to people that have had some encounter with the Queen or with King Charles and see if I can't put that together into a coherent and readable book.
Beyond books, little keepsakes are also flying off the shelves. This souvenir shop has sold out of Paddington bears. Francis Thrayer's stocking up on new items inscribed with the Queen's date of birth and date of death.
Mugs, bobble hats, some pens, some crowns and magnets, all things.
On Monday, some shops are likely to be closed in London. In an extremely rare move, there will be no Big Macs sold here on Monday, the day of the Queen's funeral. In a tweet, McDonald's announced that all of its restaurants across the UK will be closed until 5 p.m, so that their staff members can pay their respects. And that's got the nod of approval from these customers.
No, we think it's brilliant that they're closing on Monday, just as a sign of respect, to such an amazing lady, really.
I think it's a good thing, because, McDonald's, it's just a fast food chain. It's not a necessity. It's just more of a privilege, right? So I definitely think it's a good idea.
A city putting their Queen first.
That report from Katie Todd, who will join us live later in the program. And if you are listening to that on radio, do check out the video version of the story filmed by Nick Monroe. It will be on our web page. It is almost 19 after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Silver Ferns have cancelled their 2 Hamilton tests against Jamaica, with the would-be visitors waylaid by an ongoing passport bungle. The 3-match series was due to get underway at the weekend, but the Sunshine Girls haven't got their travel documents back from Washington after sending them off for visas. Well, here with the latest is sports reporter Felicity Reid. So what's going to happen and what is happening?
It's been an evolving situation over the last 72 hours since Netball New Zealand first found out that Jamaica actually probably were going to be a bit delayed in coming to New Zealand. I was just speaking with David Cooper, who's the head of commercial for Netball New Zealand, and he said to me that it's actually becoming an increasingly frustrating situation for them. So once they first found out, obviously at the head of that 72 hours, a little bit frustrating, but as he said, as time has ticked on, it's become increasingly frustrating for them. So what he's saying is that from what he's hearing is he expects that they'll get their passports to them within the next 24 hours. But from what he's heard so far, he's not making any plans until those Jamaicans are actually on the plane. So without those Hamilton games, those 2 Hamilton games that were originally scheduled, those have been dropped. Now we start, there'll be that Auckland game, that Wednesday game, that will still go ahead. I'm hearing murmurings that there'll be a Tuesday and Thursday game in Auckland as well, but this hasn't been confirmed just because we're not sure when the Jamaicans are actually going to make it here. You'd imagine something like this. He's also going to be taking a bit of a financial hit. That's something.
Yeah, what happens with the Hamilton tickets, which I imagine people had already
that was going to be a sellout. So he's saying that you can get a refund for that, and he's also saying that there'll be a sellout at the Wednesday Auckland one. But again, there's the movement. There's going to be a financial hit for that, and he's saying that they're willing to take that because netball fans haven't seen much of the Silver Ferns on court in New Zealand over the last few years. Obviously, limited opportunities for that. So he's saying that the Jamaican team have actually already been assembled in Jamaica. And I did ask him, have they had Netball New Zealand had any thoughts of abandoning this? He's saying no, he wants to get it out on court and get the fans an opportunity. Equally, I asked him, did he think Jamaica was still committed to coming here? Yeah. Again, he said yes, they had been in camp and he did think that they were still committed to following through with this.
Yeah, so a bit of a moving feast. And the thing is, they can refund your ticket, but they kind of can't refund you the disappointment, can they? So let's move on to the All Blacks Bledisloe Cup. Very controversial victory, but it also came at a cost.
It did. 3 players were injured during that, and they may be in doubt for next week's game against Australia back here in Auckland. That's including midfielder Quinn Tupaira, and if you're a bit squeamish like me, you didn't really enjoy watching that hit on his leg. But Coach Ian Foster did give an update on the injury toll.
Sam Cane came off with symptoms, so he wasn't tested at the ground, was tested late last night, passed his tests, but we'll just review him. David Avili failed an HIA last night at the ground, so he'll go into the normal 12-day protocol. Quinn Tupaira's got a ruptured medial ligament and a partial rupture of the ACL, so probably a 2 to 3 month injury, and we will wait and see whether it's operable or whether it rehabs.
So as we're just hearing there from Ian Foster, that is going to rule Quinn Tupaira out for the rest of the season. Obviously, this next Bledisloe Cup game, but also the All Blacks Northern Tour. And from that big hit has actually come with some more repercussions for the player Darcy Swain, who took him out for that. Originally received a yellow card. The SANZAR citing commissioner has jumped on board with some of that. Well, there was a lot of outcry. I'm sure that the commissioner saw this himself, has jumped in, given it a red card, which means he'll be in front of a judicial hearing on Monday.
Thanks, Felicity. That's Felicity Reid with our sports news there. Don't forget, you can get in touch with your feedback about anything you've heard on the program, homai or whakaaro. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or there's always the email. We love a good email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now to head to the headlines. Ko Eve Ano Tēnei.
More than 20 schoolgirls have had a lucky escape after their journey to school took a terrifying twist this morning. Their school bus crashed on a motorway overbridge through a railing, leaving the front part of the bus teetering over the bridge. One person was taken to hospital and the St Mary's College students were checked over by St John's ambulance staff. American officials are reviewing the death of a Christchurch-born man who was shot by police in the state of Colorado. Christian Glass was shot 5 times after calling for help when his car got stuck near Denver in June. The District Attorney's Office and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation are reviewing the case. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has arrived in London ahead of Queen Elizabeth's funeral on Monday. She will visit the new UK Prime Minister and members of the royal family. The queue to visit the Queen's coffin is currently 11.5 hours long. Some Facebook groups are using the carrot emoji to share anti-vaccine content, hiding it from automated moderation tools. One group has more than 250,000 members. Vaccine misinformation is banned from Facebook, but emojis are difficult for algorithms to interpret. And Auckland commuters are experiencing delays during rush hour after a crash on State Highway 1 just before the Mount Wellington off-ramp. A northbound lane remains blocked and motorists should expect long northbound delays from Puhoi to Warkworth. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, just a bit more on that traffic news. That crash at Warkworth, north of Auckland City, has been cleared. It was blocking a northbound lane on State Highway 1 just before Hudson Road, but it's been cleared, so there may still be delays heading north, and nothing else to report on the roads around the country. Our next news headlines and traffic news are at 5:40.
No, Mihi, Evie, I'm still back at 18 hours in the queue.
11
and a half was it? That's still enough.
Oh.
11.5 hours. And I wonder if there comes a point where they go, don't bother joining the back of the queue because you're not going to make it before we have to move the Queen on.
I imagine they'll give them a little sign at some point saying this
Yeah,
person is the last one to see the Queen.
And imagine if you were the last one through. Pretty amazing experience anyway, but hopefully we might be able to find that out from Katie Todd when she joins us later in the program. She is in London. A Christchurch townhouse developer is offering a 1-year mortgage holiday at their expense for buyers who make a purchase by the end of October. T's and C's apply, of course. You have to be an out-of-towner. You might be surprised what fits that definition. And Brookfields launched the offer this week as the market continues to slide from last year's peak, with Real Estate Institute figures showing the house price index fell almost 6% on the same time last year. Well, joining us now is Brookfields Director Vincent Holloway. Kia ora, Vincent.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Shall we get the T's and C's out of the way first? Who qualifies for this deal? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. So basically anyone who lives outside of Christchurch city limits who is buying a house to live in Christchurch qualifies.
So when you say outside the city limits, do you mean what the council limits? And when you say buying in Christchurch, it just has to be within those city limits?
So yes, correct. So all of the houses we build are within Christchurch city limits as far as the council defines them. And yeah, correct. Anyone moving in from outside of Christchurch city limits. Now, obviously, it's really marketed at mainly Auckland and Wellington. But we've also, just to put a ring around the city to make it really easy, we've also included anyone moving in from the likes of Rolleston or Lincoln and places like that.
Right, so how does the mortgage holiday work? Do you pay them a lump sum up front, or do you literally pay their mortgage every month for a year?
We have two options. We can actually pay the lump sum up front, which once we started getting all these questions asked by people, we decided that was probably going to be the easiest thing for most. But we can also pay it monthly as well if they'd prefer to just have it come straight in and go straight out.
Vincent, doesn't that suggest that you're pricing your houses too high? If you can afford to knock that off the top, why don't you just lower the price from the get-go?
Well, it is kind of like lowering the price. It's just a lot more attractive of an offer to offer the mortgage paid for a year. I mean, if you bought a car and you got a $5,000 discount or your petrol paid for a year, I can guarantee that most of your listeners would rather the petrol paid.
Yeah, so the other condition, isn't it, that it has to be on a 30-year mortgage? That could end up costing them. If they have a 25-year mortgage, I mean, that's thousands of dollars difference between paying off a 25 and 30-year mortgage.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand the question. The reason I put a 30, it's not that your mortgage has to be on 30 years. It's that the payment has to be on the equivalent of what it would be if it was 30 years, just to protect us from people putting their mortgage payment period down to 1 year and have us pay it off for them.
Yeah, so the cap, what's your cap? in terms of what you're prepared to go up to for the 1 year of mortgage payments then?
Well, there is really no cap so long as your mortgage is, the payment is spread out over 30 years or the equivalent to, and that your interest rate is based on one of the 5 main banks' 1 year fixed interest rates. And because it's one of our houses, we know that we know how high it can possibly go.
So why are you needing to do this?
At the moment, we're just wanting to sell more houses, really. So, and we obviously discount like anyone does when they're trying to sell something. So it was just a really attractive way to put a discount.
Can you give us a bit of an idea how things have shifted over the past year in terms of sales for you guys?
Yeah, sure. So we're probably selling slightly less than we were this time last year. The only thing is that because we are essentially in the middle of the transaction, we're buying land at a market price and then building a house on it and then selling the house. We're not really that affected because we're constantly buying stuff at today's price and selling townhouses at today's price as well. So the prices we're paying for land has dropped significantly, and then therefore the prices we're selling houses for has as well.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to make a pitch because you're plugging for mainly Aucklanders and Wellington. Why would they want to move to Christchurch? You've got 30 seconds and go.
Oh, goodness. Well, I actually moved down to Christchurch from Auckland about 5 years ago, and I mean, it was the best decision I ever made with my life. It's so much closer to everything else. You've got ski fields, mountain bike tracks, the beach, all within, the mountain bike tracks and the beach are within 10, 15 minutes from most places in Christchurch. You can go skiing or snowboarding in about an hour and a half up to Mount Hart. It's much more relaxed down here, easier to get a table at a restaurant. Does that fit 30 seconds?
Yeah, just a shame if you like warmer temperatures. Hey, it's been a pleasure talking to you. That's Vincent Holloway, who is the director of Brooksfield, who are offering that 1 year mortgage holiday, in essence, or a discount to encourage more people into the city in Christchurch buying properties. It is 5:30. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And let's stick with the business theme. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier, who is here to talk business and is in the studio right now. What are we talking about, Nona? What's your first thing you want to have a yarn about?
We could talk about Christchurch again. I mean, switch the order here. Or we could just talk about manufacturing, which is what we were planning to talk about. And we've had the Performance of Manufacturing Index today. And hey, we got some really strong numbers, so that's great. Across the board expansion, best level we've seen in more than a year. All quite good news.
What period does it cover, Nona?
It's the most immediate. We're talking numbers that are just from the month just passed. It's these numbers are different than a lot of the data we get. This is about activity, what manufacturers are doing. And so they're doing well. Their expansion is at 54.9. That's anything above 50 is expansion. So it's an increase of 1.4 points overall. But we're seeing new orders gaining 8.9 points. That's quite good. That was at a 12-month high. So there's new orders. This is always positive. Now, there's some curious data, though, in the employment. So we're seeing expansion in employment, but no one knows where those people are coming from. I know. It's a bit of a confusion because we're not really getting a whole lot more people in. I did an interview recently with people talking about the number of people moving into the health tech sector.
Right.
And the expansion there is huge. And what's happened, though, is it's ended up dropping the average income. And that's because they're bringing in a lot of entry-level people with very limited skills, learning on the job, and working in the tech sector in manufacturing. So it could be that that's where we're seeing it. So people who are perhaps working in, the tourism industry and other hospitality and so on, retraining into new roles, new industries. And so it's becoming but that would explain why we're seeing shortages in some sectors and other sectors are doing very well. So people are chasing those opportunities and the money.
Okay, let's talk about electric planes, which kind of give me the heebies, even though, it's all good for the environment. How's New Zealand getting involved in developing commercial electric planes? I always have the vision that the battery runs out and it drops out of the sky. Sorry.
That's what actually a lot of people probably have a fear of, getting on an electric plane. What happens if there's an electrical strike or what have you? But there's a company in Sweden that's been working on these for a while. Now, we do have an electric plane working out of Christchurch Airport. It's a 2-seater. You could go and try it out. Yeah,
it sounds like fun.
Anyway,
2 seats in an electric plane.
Christchurch is already offering a recharging service. But because of the work they've done, along with the rest of New Zealand, with our commitment to renewable energy, we've got 4 members on this global board that are helping the Swedish company develop this plane called the ES30. It's supposed to be launched in 2026, and we're going to get a couple of them to test out of Christchurch Airport, apparently.
Well,
because of the terrain there. There's lots of good reasons why people like Christchurch. I'm just saying, the airport, for example.
Sounds super. Let's do an Olympic-style sprint around the markets, please, Nona.
Okay, well, let's do that. So the index, it fell. That's the top 50 index. It fell 0.2%, 78-point drop to 11,580. Not so surprising, given some of the conditions globally. No New Zealand dollar, well, trading at 59.8 US cents. That's right, you've heard that. 89 Australian, but holding very steady against the pence at 52.2.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier with Business News there. Otago is one of the least diverse regions in the country, and its local bodies reflect that. But a growing number of candidates hope to change that at next month's local elections. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown spoke to some of them.
When it comes to diversity, Otago is an outlier in Aotearoa. About 87% of people identify as European, compared to 70% nationally, and only 1 in 12 are Māori, 1 in 14 Asian, and 1 in 37 Pacifica. In central Otago, those discrepancies are even more exaggerated. That's part of the reason local Youth Trust Chair Jaden Crom has put his hand up.
As far as I'm concerned, even if we don't all agree, if you have that diversity of thought and opinion and experience, then that helps us get the best result at the end of the day.
The 27-year-old of Waikato Iwi says he's already heard from others who will be standing in the future as a result.
Because it hasn't really been done before, makes it quite hard for some people. So I've already had others who have now come out and said, next time I feel a bit more confident that I could run. And so I've said from day one that even if I lose and don't get onto council, if it means next time we have more people under the age of 30 or more Māori or Pacific running, then that will still be a win for me.
Jaden Crom has big policy goals, with affordable housing at the top of his list. Queenstown Lakes has long been Otago's most diverse district. 1 in 10 are of Asian descent, but it's been a voice missing from its local politics. Matt Wong, owner of Queenstown's iFly indoor skydiving attraction, hopes to change that, but admits it wasn't part of his thinking in standing for council.
I think one of the key elements that I was thinking more of was the age and the experience and the direction that I come from. Councillors tend to be a little bit older. I think the average age is 54 and male. My background is I'm a father of 2 kids, young kids at primary school. I'm a business owner. I employ staff here, and I just happen to have an ethnic background to me.
But Mr Wong has noticed the lack of diverse voices around the council table. He says there are unique barriers for minorities to overcome.
I think the challenge of taking on a position like a councillor in local government has felt like you had to be a local for a very long time. I think a lot of the times minority cultures feel they don't have a voice, and it takes a very brave person to stand up and say, I want to run for council.
Hana Halalele, who became the Waitaki District's first Pacifica councillor in 2019, says there are systemic factors which make it difficult for Māori and Pacifica to stand.
The model that local body elections operate within make it difficult for not only the wider community, but specifically like Māori and Pacifica to participate. Like our families, we need 2 income earners. Like our children, just the current model and the structure that it operates within makes it hard.
She says diverse voices and perspectives are needed in decision making, and greater efforts need to go into ensuring a wider range of people can participate in local democracy. All the candidates agree a greater emphasis on civics at school would be a start. Voting papers start arriving around the country today, with polling closing on October the 8th.
And that report was from Timothy Brown. It is 28 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The father of a Christchurch-born young man shot by police in the United States says his death amounts to murder. 22-year-old Christian Glass was shot 5 times by police after he called them for assistance when his car got stuck near Denver, Colorado in June. At a press conference, his parents have made an emotional plea for the officers involved to be charged. Now, Rachel Graham has more, but a warning, some of the details in this story may be disturbing.
Christian Glass's dealings with the authorities on June the 11th earlier this year starts calmly, with him asking for help.
Hello, 911.
I'm in a vehicle. My vehicle got stuck in a really bad way.
But when Clear Creek County Police arrived, Christian said he was fearful to get out of the car, and the situation escalated as more police arrived on scene. Body camera footage of Christian's final moments show officers smashing the car window when he doesn't heed their demands to get out. They fire beanbag rounds and taser him before shooting him dead.
Impact, impact, impact!
Not dropping it. Drop the knife, Christian! Drop the knife!
Okay, one more. Reach in and get the...
Jason. Jason from the back. Don't do it, Christian! Don't do it! Drop the knife!
Drop the knife!
Drop that knife! Someone tase his ass!
Christian had told police he had 2 knives, a hammer, a rubber mallet and rocks in his car, tools he used for his hobby as an amateur geologist. When police arrive, he offers to throw them out the car window, but is told not to. Christian's father, Simon Glass, says his son had called police for help.
He trusted the police to come and help him. Instead, they attacked and killed him.
In the lengthy 911 audio, Christian Glass can be heard saying he is stuck in a trap, that he feared skinwalkers and was worried he was going to be killed. The dispatcher told police Glass sounded very paranoid, believed he was in an ambush and that people were watching him. Christian Glass was born in Christchurch, but his family moved to the US when he was 10. Speaking to US reporters for the first time since the shooting, his father, Simon Glass, vowed to pursue justice for his son.
Our son's life is extinguished and no one is accountable.
Simon Glass says the officer who shot Christian had a callous disregard for human life, but is back at work. Christian's mother, Sally, says there is a systemic problem with policing in the United States, and that needs to change.
And what keeps me upright, and what keeps me putting one foot in front of the other, is to seek justice, and really to get that behind bars.
She says police need to know that if they act criminally, they will face charges and punishment, just like anyone else. Following Christian's death, the Sheriff's Office said Mr Glass tried to stab an officer with a knife. The District Attorney's Office and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation are reviewing the case.
And it is 19 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Don't forget, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Homai o whakaaro. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time to go to the headlines now. Anei Iwi, mina pitipita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. The parents of a Christchurch-born man killed by US police officers in June have made an emotional plea for the officers involved to be charged, saying there's a systemic problem with policing in America. 22-year-old Christian Glass was shot 5 times after calling police for help when his car got stuck in Colorado. A brawl almost broke out in the High Court today in Whanganui after the sentencing of a Hells Angels gang prospect who carried out a vicious assault on his partner, who later died in hospital. Tensions quickly erupted between the families after Zane Powder Wallace was sentenced to at least 15 and a half years in prison for murdering Jasmine Wilson. People in London are queuing for a second night to see the Queen's coffin as she lies in state at Westminster Hall. The queue is now nearly 8 kilometres long with an estimated wait time of more than 11 and a half hours. Voting for local body elections begins today and all voters are being urged to take part. Local Government New Zealand's chief executive says traditionally younger people don't vote due to a misconception that local elections are only for ratepayers. But she says local government affects everyone in the community. And Scottish researchers have found that eating a big breakfast and a smaller dinner could aid weight loss by making a person feel less hungry. The team from Aberdeen University are investigating the link between eating and the human body clock. I'm not sure hunger's the problem. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic. No new delays to report on the roads around the country, but before we sign off from traffic headlines, tomorrow is the Rotorua Marathon, so any traffic around the lake will be sharing the roads with runners, so take care. Our next news and weather is at 6.
So they're saying that you should eat more breakfast, was it, Evie?
Big breakfast and a big dinner so that you don't feel hungry. But as I said, I'm not sure hunger is the problem.
I'm a big fan of the second breakfast, one of my favourite things. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A number of you getting in touch about the Auckland mayoral race. This listener says an epic fail by Viv. She better pay that outstanding bill. Steve says, I'm glad the candidate who pulled out was in Auckland. If it had happened in my electorate, we'd hear nothing from RNZ, but yet we get blamed for not voting when I've heard nothing about my election on the radio. That's Steve. Steve, whereabouts in the country are you, please? And we can see if we can rectify that for you. Get back in touch. Someone else says, so a wannabe council politician didn't manage to arrange giving up in time, and this is supposed to encourage us to vote for local bodies. I should have said earlier that we did approach Viv Beck for an interview, but she declined to come on the program this evening. On the subject of the death of the young Kiwi man while he was born in New Zealand, Christian Glass, someone says that they have watched the first part of the US police officer telling the New Zealander to get out of the car, and they say quite obviously he had trouble with his anxiety, but these US cops don't care about how someone feels, that person says. On the subject of mortgage holidays, this is a promotion, I suppose, down in Christchurch where they're offering to pay your mortgage for a year if you buy a home before the end of October. Someone says a mortgage holiday is not a good thing. A holiday is not a discount. It is just delaying the repayment. I suppose it depends on what you do with the money that they give you because they're prepared to give it to you in a lump sum. Now, Catherine has given me a telling off because I questioned the warmth in Christchurch, and she says, shame on you, Lisa. Christchurch is warmer than Auckland in summer, but I would say, Catherine, summer only lasts for 3 months, and I'm a failed Canterbury University student, so I do know what the cold weather is like in Christchurch. I say that in my defence. Thank you for your feedback. Parents rushing their sick children to Palmerston North hospitals under pressure. Emergency department will soon be able to sit away from the weekend drunks and other distractions. Design work has begun on a children's only waiting area, but the improvements won't be funded by the public purse. Manawatu reporter Jimmy Ellingham has more.
When 1-year-old Wesley fell over and hit his head, his mum Ellie Guest rushed to ED while her profusely bleeding son fell in and out of consciousness. But once he was given a preliminary check and assessed as being alert and awake, Ms. Guest knew she'd be in for a long wait. For 9 hours she had to try to keep her son calm amid the chaos.
We were in the midst of COVID just coming down to Palmy as well, so there was a lot of anxiety around, all these sick people around. Quite often in ED there's people that are intoxicated and being quite loud, and it's quite an intimidating environment to be in.
A children's only waiting area would have made the world of difference.
You have a noisy child who wants to be loud and play around and stuff like that. Being in an environment where you've got other people that, have children as well and understand all of that, it would be a calmer experience as a parent, not having to worry about, other people going, oh, that noisy child.
Te Whatu Ora Mid-Central District Director Jeff Brown, who is a paediatrician, says it's better to treat children when they're in a comfortable environment.
If you're trying to encourage a child to let you have a look at them as a nurse or a doctor, let you do something for them to make them better, it's really helpful if they are feeling safe. It's a child-friendly, a whānau-friendly environment.
It's accepted Palmerston North Hospital's emergency department struggles to cope with the numbers coming through. Dr Brown says it was built for 17,000 people a year, but is dealing with 55,000. A new ED could be years away, which is no comfort to patients, including children.
If they're scared, if there's people shouting and crying and screaming and paying next door, it's a whole different situation.
In July, the Palmerston North Hospital Foundation was created, making the Children's ED its first project. Independent of Te Whatu Ora, it's well on its way to raising the expected $250,000 needed for the children's area, which it's hoped will be ready early next year. Dr Brown says the foundation, which is similar to those at other hospitals, will soon get to work on its next project.
The whole idea of the Hospital Foundation from the trustees is to raise money for the things which Te Whatu Ora would not see as priorities. It's not that they're not important, but there is only so much money that can go around.
Foundation Chairman Brendan Duffy says the design and practical work in the new children's ED will be left to the experts.
The further away we are from the construction part of it, the better. My sense is the foundation is the body that finds the revenue to make the difference, and then working with the senior management team, they would then take lead on the project.
About 650 children go through the ED each month, so the new waiting area will be a busy yet calmer space.
And that was Jimmy Ellingham reporting. For the first time, tunnelling has begun under a major harbour in Tamaki Makaurau. It's part of Watercare's giant Wastewater tunnel, which is expected to make the city's polluted beaches a thing of the past. And burrowing for 1.5 k's under the Manukau Harbour is the most challenging part of the 15-kilometre project. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went underground to check it out.
Tamaki Makaurau's growing population is putting a strain on our wastewater network. When it rains heavily, sewage overflows into stormwater drains and out to sea, making it unsafe to swim. Watercare's wastewater tunnel, known as the Central Interceptor, is aimed at reducing those overflows by 80%. With a 15-kilometre pipeline under construction using this huge boring machine, it's as high as a giraffe and as wide as 4 white rhino.
The tunnel boring machine first began its journey here in Whanganui this time last year. It's travelled 2.5 kilometres and is currently sitting 25 metres underground.
The corridor will pass from Whanganui all the way to Grey Lynn. Right now its biggest task is passing under the harbour, 15 metres below the seabed.
You've got a body of water above you as opposed to land, and so if something goes wrong it just makes it much harder to go and work on the TBM.
That's Programme Director Shane Kunis. There's also potential risk of flooding if water seeps through the cutter head. Work on the machine beforehand has been crucial.
A bit like looking at your car before you go on a long journey, so we made sure she's in tip-top condition to go. And when we go, we're not stopping. The next time we'll see her is when she pops out in Hillsborough at what we call PS23 or Pump Station 23.
But if something does go wrong, the TBM's equipped with 2 safety chambers that can hold 40 people for up to 24 hours. It'll take around 3 months to tunnel under the harbour, excavating 16 metres a day. Vax McKernan is the lead surveyor. His job is crucial to make sure the machine is on the right track.
Quite a small margin of error, so our job is just to keep everything in the right place.
So far, so good, but if they get things wrong,
sending the TBM, off into areas that we haven't drilled ahead of time, so we don't know what ground we could be facing. We could be going into areas that we're not supposed to be, under people's properties that we're not licensed to go under. So huge amount of risks.
There are dozens of different nationalities on the team. A lot of workers have travelled from Italy, bringing their patron saint of mining, St Barbara, with them. Tunnel manager Makili Pedris is one of them.
We have three crews working 24 hours, 7 days a week. So each crew is approximately composed by 22 people between surface and tunneling, plus staff and engineers. In total we are about 120 people.
And that's just the tunnelling team. All up, there's over 500 people involved in the project. Makili describes the operation.
The train just came out from the TBM, from the tunnel boring machine, with 1.6 meter excavated, and all the material that they extract from the TBM is in these wagons. So now they're gonna take the wagon, they bring in the surface, and they will tip the wagon, so we can take the material we can dispose the material somewhere else.
The soil's then transported onto trucks and taken to nearby Pokitutu Island to transform a former quarry into a park for locals. All going well, the machine will reach dry ground in Hillsborough in 3 months' time. It'll be another 4 years before the pipeline reaches its final destination in Grey Lynn, providing clean waterways as Auckland's population grows in years to come.
And do check out the video for that story. We'll put it on our web page. Aussie fossil hunters have made a heart-stopping discovery, a 380 million year old preserved prehistoric fish with its ticker still intact. The remains of the extinct fish, known as a placoderm, were found in the remote Western Australia, inland from the beach resort of Broome. Now, it's quite a find because normally it's bones rather than soft tissue that turns into fossils, and the discovery of the internal organs was only made possible by advanced imaging equipment that allows researchers to see inside the rock-encased fossils. Paleontologist Professor John Long was on the team that made the discovery.
When you're in the field, you find these like rocks like this, they look like just rocks, but hit them with a hammer and they have bones and skeletons inside them. But with new technology like the synchrotron and the neutron beam facility, we can image the fossils inside the rock. And that's how we've discovered these amazing soft tissues, such as the heart, the liver, the stomach, and even the intestine of these really ancient fish.
So how amazing is it to find a heart in a fossil?
It's really just mind-bogglingly rare. It's extremely difficult to find soft tissue in any fossils. But these are so well preserved, these fish that lived on an ancient reef. They died and were almost snap frozen, if you like, by rocks being formed around them through crystals growing on the decaying carcass. So we have not just organs, but three-dimensional organs, the heart with the chambers of the atrium and the ventricle still present, the stomach with the glandular texture of how it looked just like a piece of tripe in a modern dish. So this gives us a real insight into the evolution of how we evolved in terms of the basic body plan that we inhabit today.
So, John, the organs, the heart itself, does it remain inside the rigid fossil of the fish, or will you actually dig into that? How does it work?
No, we don't need to, because like this fossil here, the whole fossil, including any soft tissue, is still in the rock. And in the old days, we'd put that rock in acid and dissolve it away, and we'd get the skeleton out. So there's a skull of one of these placoderms that's been etched out of the rock. But by using the synchrotron and these very powerful new tools, we can image the soft tissue while it's still in the rock. Now, that soft tissue might have dissolved away if we put it in the acid like we've been doing the past 30 years or so to prepare these fossils. So it's a whole new ballgame now that we prepare these fossils with new technology to reveal new layers of information we could never see before, like the heart and the liver and the stomach.
So I think to your left you have an example of the fish that we're talking about. Go-go fish, is it right to call it that?
Well, this is a placoderm fish.
Right.
The placoderm fish are an ancient group of jawed fish, the very first fish to have jaws and teeth. And they looked a bit like this, a bit like a shark with an armoured thick plates covering the head. And this is what we commonly find at go-go.
They look pretty scary.
Yeah, well, this fella, Dunkleosteus, was up to 8 metres long. It was bigger than a great white. They were the first mega predators on Earth. So placoderms are really interesting, and they're also the first creatures on Earth to have jaws and teeth, to have external sexual organs, which we discovered with embryos in these ancient fish from go-go. So they've given us lots of insights into the evolution of the basic human body plan.
So for you guys, what's next?
Well, we have lots of go-go fish we've collected over the past 36 years that we haven't obviously prepared or studied all of them. So we have a number of new species that we have yet to unveil. And as we put them through these exciting new tools like the synchrotron and the neutron beam, who knows what other new things we're going to discover. It's just a joy to come and work on these things because you never know what you're going to find.
Sounds like the ultimate treasure hunt.
It is. It's, the treasure of knowledge is the greatest treasure of all, and that's what we give to the world.
If you want to see that freaky fish and get your fossil nerd on, there's an extended version of that interview with paleontologist Professor John Long. It'll be on our website. A Whanganui moggy has used up one of its 9 lives after being rescued from a phoenix palm in Gonville, where it's been stuck for about 2 weeks. Rio was plucked from the tree this morning after a rescue mission that's drawn in the whole community. Robin Martin has more.
Nobody's entirely sure how Rio got stuck in the tree, but Jodie Hawara of Animal Rescue New Zealand, who helped free the cat, has a theory.
Now that we know that it's definitely not feral, because usually, I mean, a feral cat would go up there and try and eat the chicks of the birds up there. But now that we know that it's a pet cat and a family cat, we seem to think maybe a dog chased it up.
Phoenix palms have nasty barbs on their fronds, making Rio's descent more challenging. Those barbs, which are poisonous, meant fire and emergency, and the SPCA couldn't help. Instead, an arborist, 2 cherry picker companies, a drone operator and enthusiastic locals all made attempts to entice the cat down. Jody says in the end a neighbour, Eddie, finally cracked it.
He set up this cage on some boards and then he went back up in the cherry picker and he nailed it up in there and cable tied it as well, so it was really secure. And and then about 8 o'clock last night, I took them down a torch so they could actually see if the cat was in there. And when I got down there, I could see the cat was straight in the cage and I was just so happy.
She says it appears Rio, who'd been nicknamed Phoenix in the meantime, has been left unscathed by its ordeal.
It's only a kitten. It's very healthy, especially for being up in the tree for 2 and a bit weeks. But yeah, it's in good health, absolutely wants cuddles.
Trieste Nielsen runs the specialist cat rescue organisation, Charm. She reunited Rio with her owner, Brad Larson. Brad, who was recovering from surgery, was surprised to learn that Rio had become a neighbourhood celebrity.
We lost track of her 3 weeks ago when just shortly after we got a new puppy, and she wasn't too happy about that, so I guess went for some time out and then got herself stuck up a tree only around the corner, really. And not being on Facebook or having read the paper the last couple of weeks, we were completely oblivious as to all the drama going on with our cat.
He says the family was overjoyed to have the 3-year-old Moggy back at home.
We've got a few kids, including 3 young daughters who just absolutely adore Rio and have been just so upset at the thought that she's gone and might not be coming back. So a bit of a reunion going on at home right now, and we're over the moon.
Brad says a family conference is planned to consider adding Phoenix to Rio's name.
Now that Moggy's got some catitude. Check it out online.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Ngā mihi o te pō, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. American officials are reviewing the death of a Christchurch-born man who was shot by police in the state of Colorado. Christian Glass was shot 5 times after calling for help when his car became stuck near Denver in June. Rachel Graham reports.
Christian Glass's parents have made an emotional plea for the officers involved to be charged and vowed to pursue justice for their son. His father, Simon Glass, says the 22-year-old's death amounts to murder. The family's lawyers have released distressing body camera footage showing Mr Glass's final moments, along with 911 audio in which the dispatcher tells the police he sounds paranoid. At the time, the sheriff's office said Mr Glass tried to stab an officer with a knife. The District Attorney's Office and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation are reviewing the case.
A brawl almost broke out in the courtroom today after the sentencing of a Hells Angels gang prospect who carried out a prolonged and vicious assault which resulted in the death of a mother of 2. Zane Powder Wallace appeared before Justice Francis Cook in the High Court at Whanganui for sentencing on charges including the murder of Jasmine Wilson. The 30-year-old died in 2019. Tensions quickly erupted between the families today after Wallace was sentenced to life imprisonment for at least 15.5 years. Open Justice reported one of Wilson's family yelled, "I hope you burn in hell," which almost led to a brawl. The teenager, whose body was found in a burned-out car near Havelock North 2 weeks ago, has been farewelled by hundreds of mourners in Hastings today. The death of 18-year-old Adiki Rigby was initially treated as unexplained, but is now the subject of a homicide investigation. The hearse carrying her body was escorted by about 20 motorcyclists to Ascend Global Church this morning for the funeral service. A family spokesperson, Michael Ngahoka, says his cousin was a beautiful, passionate person who lived life full throttle. He says today's service was about showing love and respect for her, but the whānau will not have closure until there's justice. Mr Ngahoka says the family are encouraging anyone with any information to get in touch with police. Ukrainian police say they've found evidence of a mass grave near the recently liberated city of Izium. The northeastern city had been under Russian occupation for 6 months. With more from Kyiv, here's the BBC's James Waterhouse.
We have a senior government advisor alleging that there are worse war crimes committed around the city of Izium than in cities like Bucha here in the Kyiv region, where as the tide of Russian occupation receded, there was overwhelming evidence there of civilians being deliberately targeted. But there are a lot of unknowns at this point in time. Nevertheless, the regional police chief says they have evidence of a mass grave which contains at least 400 bodies, they say. Exhumations are going to take place to get a clearer picture, but we don't know who buried the people there, and we also don't know how they died.
Mourners from around the world are queuing for a second night to see the Queen's coffin as she lies in state in London. Vanessa Nanthakumaran, the first mourner to see the late monarch's coffin, says the experience helped her to deal with the death of her husband in February. A government queue tracker estimates the wait time is at least 11.5 hours, with the queue nearly 8 kilometres long. There'll be a nationwide 2 minutes of silence at the end of the Queen's funeral service on Monday, with a procession through London to follow. The polls are officially open, with Auckland set to elect a new mayor as incumbent Phil Goff hands over the chains after 6 years. Voting paper drop boxes are at various spots around the city from today up until midday Saturday, October the 8th. However, Council Democracy Services Manager Rose Leonard says voter apathy has become a problem in local body elections.
Around New Zealand, the average council's around about 40%, but actually in Auckland it was lower than that. Last time we had 35%, and that was down from 38% the election before. So we're really looking for a big lift this year and are doing everything we can to sort of address the things that we know really kind of hinder people from voting.
Rose Leonard says compared with the general election, voter turnout is about half. A Whanganui moggy is none the worse for wear after being stuck in a phoenix palm for more than 2 weeks. The microchipped cat, Rio, which has been reunited with its owners, was plucked from the tree this morning after a rescue mission that's drawn in the whole community. Jodie Hawida of Animal Rescue New Zealand says the elusive feline is in good nick and just wants cuddles. Rio's owner, Brad Larson, says the family is overjoyed to have her home. He believes Rio fled about 3 weeks ago after he brought home a new puppy. And the winners have been announced for the annual Ig Nobel Prizes, which are awarded for quirky scientific research. They include a crash test dummy in the shape of a moose. The BBC's Jonathan Amos has more.
The Ig Nobel's mantra is that the science they laud should first make you laugh and then make you think. So a crash test dummy in the shape of a moose seems funny until you realise that in Sweden, thousands of these animals are involved in vehicle collisions every year. Likewise, when you hear ice cream is being given to cancer patients, you raise an eyebrow until you learn cold temperatures reduce the inflammation in the mouth that results from some aggressive treatments. The Ig Nobels have been celebrating such science for 32 years now. Winners get a paper trophy and a cash prize in the form of an old $10 trillion bill from Zimbabwe.
That's the news.
This week, country life is somewhere in the North Island. And I know that you quite like to keep your ginseng a crop secret.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, because actually it's a quite valuable crops. We don't want people to steal that.
We're finding out about growing ginseng in a pine forest.
They grow together. This one.
It's a double root. Country Life,
like a twin.
Friday at 9 during nights and Saturday morning after the 7 o'clock news on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National, kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on radio, rnz.co.nz, and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. For Northland and Auckland, partly cloudy with showers, mainly in the west, clearing tomorrow morning. Coromandel, the Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, cloudy periods and isolated showers from this evening. From Waikato to Kapiti, fine today today. Frost or fog tomorrow morning, then cloudy periods from tomorrow afternoon. From Gisborne to the Wairarapa, cloud and a few showers spreading north, then becoming fine tomorrow morning early for Wairarapa. Wellington, Marlborough and Nelson, cloudy periods, isolated showers clearing Wellington and elsewhere tomorrow morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, partly cloudy with a few showers, but fine in Westland and the north of Fiordland today. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, isolated showers are clearing and becoming mainly fine, frosty tomorrow morning. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, showers today. The time is coming up to 8 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Ngā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Preparations for the Queen's funeral are in full swing in London, with thousands of people continuing to trek to Westminster Hall to see Her Majesty lying in state. Our reporter Katie Todd joins us live from London. Katie, what's happening there this morning? Is there still a really long queue?
Kia ora, Lisa. That is correct. I'm standing on Westminster Bridge. You might be able to see, if you're watching the show tonight, there's a number of people next to me, and they're starting to ditch their camping chairs and get into the last stage of the queue here. They've been waiting 8 hours, these people next to me, and they're expecting another couple of hours to get to see the Queen. That's all night. It's an unfathomable length of queue. It's something like 8 kilometres, I believe, at this stage, and just a constant procession of people going past her coffin and paying their respects.
So, Katie, do you know if they actually did sort of all stay in the queue overnight, or could they kind of reserve their place and go away and have a hot drink and a toilet stop and then come back, or how did it work?
No, they stayed in the queue all night. I was chatting to some of these people just before, and they said it was kind of a constant movement all night. There was about 1 hour where they got to stay still, but they're all feeling pretty sore. It's a long time to be on your feet.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they are determined, and good on them. Now, you've heard from the Prime Minister and the New Zealand Defence Force. What have they had to say?
Yes, so Jacinda Ardern touched down in London yesterday and spoke to media in the afternoon. She's got a pretty packed schedule while she's here. She's hoping to see the Queen lying in state. I don't believe she's going to have to join this queue to do so. And then she's hoping to have 3 meetings. The first is with Prince William today. She will be going and paying her respects and offering the country's condolences, and then addressing media this afternoon and telling us about that meeting. She's also hoping to meet with King Charles and the UK Prime Minister Liz Truss during her time here, and then of course attending the funeral on Monday. As for the Defence Force, now there's 24 personnel from New Zealand who will be taking part in the procession after the funeral. They're in full rehearsal mode. They have been getting up at 3 a.m. and walking the path that they will be walking on Monday, and they have talked about actually seeing people lining the streets at 3 a.m. And that's given them a sense of just the scale of what they're taking part in and how significant it is.
It is absolutely fascinating, Katie, watching that queue as you're standing there talking to us. It's moving at, if you look over your shoulder, it's moving at quite a cracking pace at the moment, and they must feel like they are so close, because we can see Big Ben off in the distance, and really they've got a block to go, and then just around the bend to get where they desperately want to be.
Not quite. They actually go down the side of this bridge here, go up to the next bridge, cross that, then come all the way back to Westminster Hall. So it's still a wee ways to go.
Oh my goodness, what a false sense of the fact that you're getting there, so close yet so far. The other thing, Katie, is that some of the British media outlets are reporting on news about Harry, the debate about the uniform, no uniform. Can you talk us through that?
Yes, so he has been granted permission to wear the military uniform for a special vigil by the Queen's side. Now that's quite a big deal, because usually that right is only reserved for working royals. So yeah, that's quite a significant thing. It's being reported in British media this morning.
I bet there's been heaps of debate. Can you get a newspaper for love or money, I'm wondering, Katie, because people will be snapping them up as kind of, not souvenirs, but markers of the occasion, I imagine. Every front page, some people will be squirreling them away.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we popped into some tube stations this morning. It was pretty depleted, and even some of the little supermarkets along the way to Westminster Bridge, no newspapers at all.
Good to talk to you, Katie. That is Katie Todd joining us live from London there. And as preparations for the Queen's funeral continue in London, food prices across the UK are rising at the fastest rate in 14 years. Millions of people are struggling to pay for their basic needs, and the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, is promising a mini budget next week that'll have significant tax cuts. With more, here's the ABC's Sally Sarah.
The next station is Brixton, where this train terminates.
Many residents of Brixton are struggling to pay for the basics as food and energy costs hit hard.
It's getting out of hand, to be honest. Some people are quiet about it, some people speak up. But it's not good at all.
Food prices in the UK are rising at the fastest pace in 14 years, and energy bills are off the charts.
Before, when I used to take £50 to go shopping, I got a lot of change left, but now, not a penny left.
This is Brixton's famous shopping street, Electric Avenue. The street got its name in the 1880s as the first street market in the UK with electric lighting. But now many locals are struggling to keep the power on at home. Do you think the politicians understand what life's like for people here in Brixton?
People, they talk, but they don't do anything because they don't know what it's like to go without anything. I'm not going to stay in the cold, because I'm old, so I'm not going to stay in the cold. You understand?
While UK inflation eased slightly in the last quarter, it's still running at 9.9%, close to a 40-year high. The war in Ukraine, rising prices and underlying inequality have collided. Poverty researcher Helen Barnard from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation says research carried out in May found 4.5 million people across the country were already behind with their bills.
Well, for people on low incomes, it is really quite catastrophic. I mean, there's an enormous amount of fear out there about what's going to happen this winter.
The government has promised a £400 energy rebate and a cap on prices, but many residents of Brixton are still waiting.
We're supposed to get this £400, this thing for the British gas. Now they keep putting it back. They keep texting you and they keep putting it back. I just got a text. They're taking the piss, look. They keep putting us on hold.
Researcher Helen Barnard fears that many low-income earners won't be able to afford heating when winter sets in.
These are not conditions that we want to see anybody living in. Our health service leaders wrote a joint letter to send to the previous Chancellor to say this is going to become an emergency for our National Health Service unless the government steps in.
In Brixton, the current economic crisis is unfolding amid years of disadvantage and discrimination. Many older residents are members of the Windrush generation who arrived from the Caribbean only to be wrongly classified by the government as illegal immigrants. Despite promises of compensation, many are still facing a bleak winter.
Well, think about the people who've worked hard in this country, and this is how you treat them, old people. We're still waiting. Our mums and dads will come here, still waiting for this Windrush money, and we still haven't got it yet.
It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Just checking out some of your feedback here. On the issue of the mayoral race, and this is Viv Beck pulling out of the mayoral race in Auckland, Fiona's got in touch to say the mayoral choices now have everything to do with the Auckland younger people and the city they get to live in. It's either slash and burn with Wayne Brown or love and growth with a Fessor. Fiona says, please tell the young people in your whānau to study and vote. Someone is asking a question about the tunnel that we had the earlier story on. They said, can you give us the dimensions of the tunnel in metres? Because I don't have much experience in rhino width. Well, the answer for you is the tunnel is 4.5 metres in diameter. Now, Catherine, you have unleashed a hornet's nest by texting us earlier and claiming that Christchurch is hotter than Auckland in the summer months. Someone else has sent us, I think it's a text, a counter text, saying meteorological data shows that Auckland is several degrees warmer than Christchurch in the summer. So it's definitely untrue that Christchurch is warmer in summer, although this may be a concern in the future as Auckland is already too hot in the summer as it is. Thank you for engaging in that debate. And on the subject of electric electric planes, which we touched on a little earlier. This person says, yeah, electric planes, I share your trepidation. Not about running out of juice mid-air, but something like the steward tripping over the power cord and inadvertently pulling it out of the wall. I do it all the time. Electric planes, ooh, they say. But Andrew, the voice of reason, says, what would be the difference in terms of running out of battery power and running out of fuel? Different situation to cars, no gas in the sky. Very true and logical, Andrew, but not all our fears are logical. 17 minutes after 6 now. The late Queen was possibly the most famous woman on earth, and she's now been portrayed on screen by countless actors. Perhaps few people studied the Queen as closely as those who played her, a role that many say was often a daunting experience. The BBC's Rebecca Jones has been talking to some of those who took on that challenge.
Upon Tuesday, the 2nd day of June in the year of grace 1953, the Queen is to be crowned.
The Queen on screen. This documentary film from 1953 about the coronation was narrated by Sir Laurence Olivier.
Into the forecourt of the palace and through the gates comes the gilded coach, 2 centuries old, bearing the young Queen to her crown.
Elizabeth II, the central character, the first television monarch. Over the decades, countless actresses have portrayed her, but for each one of them, the challenge was the same: capturing the spirit of a woman famous for giving so little away.
Nowadays, people want glamour and tears, the grand performance. I'm not very good at that. I never have been. I prefer to keep my feelings to myself.
Dame Helen Mirren in her Oscar-winning performance as Elizabeth II in The Queen.
Duty first, self second. That's how I was brought up. That's all I've ever known.
She later recreated the role on stage in Peter Morgan's play The Audience. She says she found her way into the character by researching as much as she could about Elizabeth as a girl.
I understood then her background, her upbringing, and also, much more important, the personality of the person before she became the monarch. Her true character, as opposed to the character that she had to embrace along with the job kind of thing. And there was one little tiny piece of film that I watched over and over again of her when she was about 12 years old, getting out of a car and meeting a dignitary. She does it with such gravitas and seriousness, and I've got to do this right, and no smirking, and there's no, aren't I cute, aren't I lovely. It's just duty, and she had that naturally.
So there are clues in gestures and demeanour, and the voice too.
The only person I have ever loved is you. And can you honestly look me in the eye and say the same?
Claire Foy played the younger Elizabeth in the first 2 series of the Netflix drama The Crown.
The broadcasts that she did and the speeches that she did at the time, her voice was very, very high. Very high. And I think it would have been too much to go in that direction because we never wanted it to be a caricature or a kind of impression.
I am proud to have inspected you today.
This was the Queen addressing a parade of veterans in Hyde Park in London in 1953.
It is therefore most appropriate that I should meet a national gathering of the men and women.
And here's Claire Foy again as the Queen.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, dear Winston.
The part of the more mature Queen in The Crown then passed to Olivia Colman.
Age is rarely kind to anyone. Nothing one can do about it. One just has to get on with it.
For her, interpreting Elizabeth II's inscrutability meant a lot of guesswork.
Her training, I suppose, means that she has to be stoic and strong. She's a rock for the nation, so you never see really what she's thinking. It's eternally fascinating.
But while many actresses may have portrayed Elizabeth II on film and television, undoubtedly the starring role in the life of the nation was always played by the Queen herself.
Love Olivia Colman playing the Queen. The White House says the transfer of migrants arriving in Texas and Florida to areas led by Democrats are deeply alarming stunts. A bus of people has been sent to Washington, D.C. and left outside Vice President Kamala Harris's house, while 2 unannounced planes were sent to a wealthy island in Massachusetts. CNN's Miguel Marquez has more from Martha's Vineyard.
Ubaldo Arcaya was in San Antonio, Texas yesterday, along with 50 other Venezuelan migrants. Today, he's in Martha's Vineyard. When you got off the plane, I asked him, what did you think of this place? Beautiful, gorgeous, he says. The people are very friendly. He says in Texas, he was promised help if he got on the plane. No idea where he was going. There were 3 options, he says: Washington, Utah, here in Massachusetts, whatever was available. The plane left and brought us here. It's a tactic we've seen in Texas, Arizona, and now Florida. Republican governors shipping migrants to so-called sanctuary cities and states with little to no notice.
There's no low that these people will go. They'll keep going lower and lower. And they're willing to use humans, children, women, families, as political pawns for their own game. It is depraved, it is evil, it is wrong, but what makes America great is what we see here today, which is an island community and a state in Massachusetts is coming together to support the people here.
Arcaya, a 27-year-old mechanic from Venezuela, says he's been welcomed with food and new clothes here on the island. He tells us he made a difficult month-and-a-half-long journey for liberty, democracy, and the promise of America. When you step on American soil, you feel at ease that you're here and well protected. You lose the stress of the journey we had to go through in 7 countries. Very stressful across all of Central America.
Roger Federer is just 1 tournament away from retirement. The Swiss champion will step away from the game with 20 Grand Slam wins. The ABC's Angus Randall reports.
We all knew it was coming. At 41 years of age and after a few years of injury-hampered campaigns, Roger Federer is hanging up the tennis shoes.
As many of you know, the past 3 years have presented me with challenges in the form of injuries and surgeries. I've worked hard to return to full competitive form, but I also know my body's capacities and limits, and its message to me lately has been clear. I am 41 years old. I've played more than 1,500 matches over 24 years. Tennis has treated me more generously than I ever would have dreamt, and now I must recognize when it is time to end my competitive career.
Tennis fans have been spoilt for choice in the men's game for close to 20 years. Federer, Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic have faced each other in some of the most memorable games ever, and they've hoovered up championships. Since Wimbledon in 2003, the so-called Big Three have won 63 of the 77 Grand Slams on offer.
I was lucky enough to play so many epic matches that I will never forget. We battled fairly, with passion and intensity, and I always tried my best to respect the history of the game. I feel extremely grateful. We pushed each other, and together we took tennis to new levels.
Roger Federer played some of his best tennis in Australia. He won the Australian Open 6 times, behind only Novak Djokovic in the men's game. His last ever Grand Slam win was in Melbourne 4 years ago. Australian player Jason Kubler is surprised he's finishing his career at the Laver Cup in London.
It's crazy that it sort of ended this week. You know, I would have thought that it would have finished more maybe a few months ago, Wimbledon, or maybe when US Open was happening. So it was a bit weird with not much of an occasion, but I'm sure there will be something for him. In my opinion, the best player of all time, you know.
Tennis is undergoing a transition. Roger Federer has played his final Grand Slam, and Serena Williams says she's evolving away from tennis, although she's yet to officially retire. Last week, the US Open was won by a 19-year-old man and a 21-year-old woman. Neither players were born when Roger Federer turned pro. Peter Johnston is a tournament director and former player.
Well, tennis does have a happy knack of always being able to throw up a new story, and there's no better example, as you said, of what happened at US Open last week with Carlos Alcaraz emerging as a 19-year-old, probably just in the time when you have the retirement of Roger. But I still think there's a few more chapters ahead for both Novak Djokovic and Rafa Nadal. And obviously with Roger moving on, it's going to leave a little hole, but I think tennis has that way of being able to fill with new stories.
The men's game has provided its fair share of tennis brats over the decades, but you'd be hard-pressed to find someone with a bad word to say about Federer.
A Kapa Haka group's remaining members are reflecting on how far Te Ao Māori has come 50 years on from its time in the spotlight. Our reporter Ashley McCall and cameraman Angus Drever went to speak with Mawai Hakona.
Not far from Te Whanganui Atara lies Orongo Mai Marae, an upper hut belonging to the group Mawai Hakona. The group won the second year of the first Kapa Haka competition back when it was called the Polynesian Festival in Rotorua in 1973. Tutor at the time, Nani Hinepoa, remembers being frightened.
It was scary because it was our first really, really big outing nationally. We were really, really lucky that year. We won most of the areas that were to win.
At the time, the majority of the group were all from different areas of Aotearoa. To help make up numbers, they had to look far and wide to recruit members because they had no men. Nene Hene says they even went to a prison.
They let us have a van load of boys to come down and practice, and they brought an officer with them and then they took them back each time. So we were able to actually have a haka team.
Adam Langford wasn't originally a member and came along to watch his wife perform during training. But despite being an Englishman from Lancashire, he was soon adopted into the rōpū.
Auntie Dobby Katane, and she came over and Adam, come on, get up. But I'm not a Māori. Said, when you come here, you're a Māori, get up. So I've been getting up ever since, yeah.
Hemi Kara praises the founders Job McEwen and David Katane for their originality in creating waiata. But he says despite advances with Kapa Haka, it's now too professional for his liking.
It's Māori in another cloak.
It used to be.
Yeah.
The
original, we're talking about originality.
Yeah.
That's, today, it's showmanship.
He prefers Kapa Haka sticks to tikana without all the acting, like how it used to be in its heyday. This is one of the waiata that Mawai Hakona sung the day they won the Polynesian Festival. Next year will be their 50th anniversary since winning, and although they sit between the ages of 80 to 90 plus, they remember the waiata well. They also performed at the Sydney Opera House that same year they won. But behind the scenes it was dire, a time when Māori were coming out of an era of being strapped for speaking the reo at school. The year before Mawai Hakona won the National Kapa Haka competition was the year the Māori language petition was delivered to Parliament. In that time, the three of them say that Kapa Haka and Te Reo Māori has come a long way, but there's still so much more work that needs to be done. Hene wants every school to have a Māori tutor to help grow the language.
You were lucky if you had one Māori tutor in a school, and they had to do the whole friggin' school, whereas now we've got so much more choice. We just don't have enough Te Reo Māori speaking people to choose the best we can to further the reo.
A language they want to keep hearing spoken every day.
That's all we've got time for. Ka kite. Catch you next week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. The teenager whose body was found in a burned-out car near Havelock North has been farewelled by hundreds of mourners in Hastings. The resilience of the economy has prompted the ANZ to forecast aggressive interest rate rises from the Reserve Bank early next year. The son of the Fijian Prime Minister, Frank Bainimarama, is facing criminal charges in Australia over domestic violence-related allegations. And scientists have unearthed a 380-million-year-old fish heart that provides insight into the evolution of vertebrates. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Coming up this week on the Sunday Night Retro Show, a look at the controversy over naming Mount Egmont, also known as Mount Taranaki, and the role of the New Zealand Geographic Board in it. We hear the story of Jalal Mick Natali, who left India in 1920, migrated to New Zealand in search of a better life, and David Steamson goes on a walk with Colleen Moore to test out her brand new set of second-hand lungs.
Yeah, I think they're feeling better than they have been on the car journey.
Every Sunday from 8, it's Sunday Night Retro on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Phil, and I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National, where because we've reached the end of Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, we'll be celebrating things tangata whenua in our Sonic Tonic after the news at Whitu at 7. And the 7:07pm question, what is your favourite Māori phrase? Think about it. Text 2101, email nights@rnz.co.nz, or you can leave a comment on the Facebook page, which is called Nights on RNZ National. In this half hour, later on, an interview that's been getting a few clicks on the website, in which Catherine Ryan on 9 to Noon spoke with Dave and Caroline Armstrong about a festival in the Bay of Islands that hasn't happened since COVID hit, but it's going to be happening soon. And Dave and Caroline will talk about that, the Upsurge Festival, in a few minutes' time, if you didn't catch it first off on 9 to Noon this morning. Right now, however, it's Focus on Politics.
Queen Elizabeth II's death has prompted an outpouring of grief around the world.
She's a person we've always looked up to. Somehow, it's just a sad day. Just a very, very sad day.
In New Zealand, many are mourning the Queen's death and reflecting on her 70-year reign.
But her passing has also revived the discussion about New Zealand's ties to the monarchy.
In many ways, New Zealand is a disguised republic.
Kia ora, I'm Annika Smith.
I'm Giles Dexter.
And I'm Katie Scotcher. Welcome to Focus on Politics. For the first time in 70 years, New Zealand has a new head of state. Upon the Queen's death, her eldest son Charles immediately and automatically became king. This week we've seen pomp and ceremony around the Commonwealth formalising the change in monarch. In New Zealand, Cabinet and the Executive Council met 48 hours after the Queen's death to formally acknowledge the new king. The proclamation of accession was then read on the steps of Parliament.
Whereas by the death of our late beloved sovereign, Queen Elizabeth II, the crown has solely and rightfully come to His Royal Highness Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We, therefore, hereby proclaim that His Royal Highness Prince Charles Arthur Philip George is now King Charles III, by the grace of God, King of New Zealand. God save the King.
The moment was historic. Such an event hasn't occurred since the 11th of February 1952, when Queen Elizabeth was officially acknowledged as New Zealand's monarch. The Governor-General, Dame Cindy Kero, reflected on this at the ceremony.
Today, on these same grounds, we bear witness to another moment of deep and historic significance for Aotearoa New Zealand.
Hundreds gathered at Parliament for the occasion, and a sea of dignitaries and MPs dressed in black watched from the forecourt. Later in the week, they had an opportunity to reflect on the Queen's reign during a special debate in the House.
Her reign corresponded with the period of most rapid change in human history. From the fall of empire, war, major societal shifts and upheavals through to the advent of television and social media, she became a touchstone, a constant, an anchor in the sea of change.
She has been such a constant presence in all of our lives, from appearing on our money and on our stamps and on our magazine covers and on our TV screens.
She came to the throne in a world of pencils and paper, black and white TV, and rotary telephones that were fixed to the wall. Her reign ended in a world with space exploration, mobile phones, and even TikTok.
Te Pāti Māori co-leader Rawiri Waititi and Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson both raised the Crown's impact on Māori.
The British Empire and the power of its monarchy was built of stolen whenua, stolen resources and stolen tongue.
With all that I have acknowledged with love for the death of a queen, the question of what her service was in aid of is certainly a legitimate one, and yes, a question for this very time.
It's long held Green Party policy to support a referendum on whether or not New Zealand should become a republic. Ms Davidson says it's too early to say if the Greens would seek a commitment to hold a referendum if it's part of the next government.